Okay, now the pad housing and the pump set up and ready to go, it's time to go on to the next step. Just before we filter the wine, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to run some water through the filter pads, which are in the pad housing. The reason we want to do this is because we want to make sure that any little bits of paper that are on the pads that might come off the pads come off in the water before you've started to filter your wine. If you don't run water through, you always run the risk of some little tiny paper particles coming through. We're going to try to avoid this. We always recommend at least a gallon of water. We have a gallon of water here in a jug. You could always just put some water in a pail if you wanted to. There's no real, it doesn't really matter what you put it in as long as it's clean. So essentially what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your black rubber stopper that you've already got here, you're going to want to attach it to the empty carboy, like so. You're going to want to take your own siphon hose and racking tube. Everybody should have one of these at home. And you're going to want to attach this end of the siphon hose to the only other available piece coming off the pad housing, which is the inside separator ring. Now, essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to take your racking tube, drop it into the jug of water. Black rubber stopper is nice and secure down on there. And we're going to plug in the pump. Now, basically, what should start to happen, and you can see this, is under vacuum, the water is going to start to come down the siphon hose, go in through the separator piece, expand through the filter pads, and eventually it's going to come out the other side. Make sure these clamps are open at this stage of the game too, something I forgot to mention, but it's important that these are open or otherwise the system won't work. Here we go. You have your water going in, and you have your water coming out the other side and depositing itself down here. So once the water's all gone through, I would normally just finish it up, but once the water's all gone through, just take this out. Another little trick here you can do, by the way, is instead of spitting water out this side, pinch this clamp off, it forces the water into the bottom, and you'll actually get the remainder of the water out of the pad housing. It's just sort of a little trick we've learned through the years, but pinch off the top clamp, and that'll empty it out quite quickly. We've got the water emptied out of the empty carboy, and the next thing you're going to want to do is basically filter the wine. We're ready to go. So you're going to put your black rubber stopper on the empty carboy, once again. Now you have your racking tube, make sure your little sediment tip is on the end. Take your airlock off the wine and put this down inside the wine. You want to avoid stirring up the sediment. One of the common problems with filtration is sediment from the bottom gets into the filter pads and plugs them up so the filtration will stop. Now, all you need to do to avoid this is just very gently set this down and leave it alone. If you just filter the wine from this position, you're not going to run into that problem with sediment getting inside the pads. Another option is this racking tube clamp. Basically, this just allows you to adjust the depth wherever you want to during the process. We like this option. It just basically gives you a little bit more control. Everything's all set up. Make sure that the pinch clamp that you had closed before is now open. Everything's ready to go. Plug in the pump, and it should start filtering. As you can see, the wine is coming up the racking tube, about to take the same path that it did with the water earlier. If it ever doesn't start, you want to make sure that this thing is nice and snug. Occasionally, you have to push it down to get it to grab, and always make sure this butterfly valve is in a horizontal position. If it's open, obviously no vacuum. So here we go. The wine's going through the one side. It's coming out the other. As the wine starts to get down, what we can do is we can sort of lower this. So once again, we're not too close to the bottom and we're not too close to the sediment. This entire process is probably going to take between 5 and 10 minutes. It's a very relatively quick process. And then we're going to be at the next step, which will go through degassing the wine and bottling the wine. So there you go. All we have to do now is wait. Take a moment to mention a couple of things. Number one, you can see the difference in the polish of the wine. I mean, this has a really bright polish. This is still a little bit cloudy. We probably actually filtered this wine a little early, but the pads can handle it, no problem. You're also going to notice there's some foam on top of the wine. Some people get concerned about this. Don't worry about it. This wine is under negative pressure right now. Gas that's inside the wine is coming out, and that's why it's foaming. It's not that there's air going into the wine, which would actually be a concern. It's gas coming out of the wine, and it basically creates a little bit of foam. We're almost at the end of the filtration. As you can see, this carboy is quite full. This one's getting low now. You don't want to make sure you get all the wine, of course. We don't want to lose any wine, so the simplest way to do that is to just tilt this up as you get towards the end. Again, even at this stage, we're trying to avoid disturbing as much sediment as possible because we basically don't want to get the pads plugged up. It could cause us problems. Especially if you were going to do another wine after this one and use the same set of filter pads, it would be even more crucial not to get those pads plugged up. So, and that is possible. But again, sediment, pads, not a good combination. So here we go, we're tilted up. We're trying to get as much wine as we can while watching it to make sure once those big blobs of sediment start getting in there that it's time to pull out. I would say that's basically good. That's as much as we're going to get. So, all of your wine's been filtered. There's still some coming in here. You notice this is spitting. Once again, let's go back to that trick that I showed you during the water filtration. Pinch off the top clamp, and it's going to now empty out the wine from the pad housing, and basically you've got more wine coming out of here. If you don't pinch off the top clamp, you're going to lose a little bit of wine. So, now the pad housing's been emptied, the carboy is full. Let the last little bits of wine come through, and pinch off the other clamp. Now, this is what we like to call the degassing stage of the filtering. What you have happening now is a closed-off system, vacuum pump, pulling gas from the wine, whether it be CO2, sulfur dioxide, any remaining gas in the wine is basically now going to come out over the next couple of minutes. If any oxygen has been introduced during the process, which it shouldn't, it would be now eliminated here. So typically what we like to do is let this sit for about another 3 minutes, possibly 4 minutes with the vacuum pump on. And after that time is up, the wine is essentially finished and ready to go. So now it's been 3 minutes, probably 4 minutes. Basically the degassing stage is now finished. So we've gotten as much gas from this wine as we're going to. You're finished. So it's time to basically unplug the filter pump. We've got a rubber stopper that's now pretty tight into here because of the vacuum. So the very simplest way to get it off is to just release the pressure by turning this, release the vacuum by turning this little valve. You can just pop it off. Now you've got a wine that is completely filtered, degassed, and ready to bottle. And if you just take a quick look at this wine, compared to what it looked like before, you'll see that the difference is unmistakable. The reason we chose a white wine for the demonstration is because it's a little bit easier to tell what it does than a red wine, but it does equally a good job with reds. The filtration is finished. All that's left to do is clean up and bottle the wine. I hope you found this informative and interesting, and I hope it's basically helped you get a better idea of the filtering process using our vacuum filtration system.